Hello, my name is Jitters, and welcome back to another episode of Why Nobody Plays, a mini-series of mine where I talk about the least picked agents in the game and try to explain why they might be underplayed. In this series, I always start by talking about the agent's strengths, before moving on to their weaknesses, and then ending each video by trying to give recommendations on how that particular agent could be improved. For this episode of Why Nobody Plays, I'm going to be talking about Yoru. Yoru is a very weird case. He's a duelist, which is the most popular class of agents in the game, and with that kind of popularity, you would think he would have a decent pick rate. But since release, he's been one of the least picked agents in the game. Before his recent buffs, I hadn't even seen a Yoru in any of my games, and even after those buffs, I feel like I saw him for a few weeks, and then he just disappeared again after people were done trying him out. Before we dive deeper into that though, I want to talk about Yoru's strengths. First, Yoru has a flash, and not just any flash, but arguably one of the best flashes in the game. In a game like Valorant, flashes are arguably the best type of utility an agent can have. It allows you to peek into corners that enemies can be holding, it can help your team flash a sight, making it easier to push, and overall just provides a lot of value. So having a flash on any agent is always a plus. Also, the difference between his flash and some of the other characters in the game is just how versatile it is. Because it can be bounced off of walls, the ground, and many other objects around the map, it can be used in many creative ways, especially when combined with his teleport. Compare this to an agent like Phoenix. If you're attacking on Ascent and try to push on an A site, some popular locations for enemies to hold from are behind Gen or Hell. In these cases, Phoenix can't really flash these enemies very effectively from A main, whereas Yoru can throw his TP into Hell, and then throw his flash there, and then be right next to the enemy when it detonates. The second point I wanted to bring up is the versatility within his kit. This is a big point and becomes much more obvious when you compare Yoru to his biggest counterpart in Phoenix. For example, let's compare their ultimates. Run It Back can be used to execute onto a site with your team on attack, for retaking a site, or as a tool early round to get info, but besides that it doesn't have many other uses. Don't get me wrong, the ultimate is very strong, but let's compare it to Yoru's ultimate. Just like Phoenix's ult, it can be used for site executes on attack, for retaking on a site, and for getting early info at the beginning of a round and then TPing back to safety. But it can also be used to get into aggressive flanking positions to get an early pick, then TP back to safety, and it can even be used to get out of sticky situations where you'd have otherwise have died. And having this many options is important because in any given moment there are multiple things you could be doing to get an advantage. The more options an agent has within their kit, the more room there is for that player to outplay an opponent. The third point I wanted to bring up is that Yoru is a very strong opper, arguably second best after Jett. This is because Yoru can take an op shot, potentially getting a kill, and then quickly change his position by using his TP to catch enemies off guard and net himself multiple kills in a round. On top of that, if he needs to peek into an angle with the op, he can use his flash to get an advantage in op duels where an enemy might have already been holding an angle. The fourth strength of Yoru's I wanted to bring up was his ability to fake a site execution. Yoru has probably the best kit for faking a site, which can be strong for potentially forcing someone on the enemy team to rotate off of the other site. His kit is strong for this because he can use his footsteps to trick the enemy team into thinking that multiple people are coming, and they can also trick util into activating like Killjoy's alarm bot, her turret, it can trigger Raze's boom bot, and even set off a cypher trip. Combined with his flash, he can get onto a site and then last second use his E to teleport all the way to the opposite site to be there with his team. On top of all that, the last point I wanted to bring up is that Yoru is a high skill cap agent that's fun to play. Let me explain. I've mentioned in other videos that some agents like Viper and Skye might have lower pick rates than other agents because they're difficult to master, which is kind of the opposite of the point I'm making here. But hear me out, there are a ton of games where there's a character who's played solely because they provide a challenge, but also provide the outplay potential to make that challenge worth the grind. For example, Overwatch has characters like Genji and Widowmaker, League of Legends has characters like Aurelia and Zed, and I would argue that Valorant's agent that fits this mold is Yoru, or at least it's supposed to be. But again, what makes an agent like Yoru able to fit into a role like that where agents like Viper and Skye don't? Well, generally the characters that fit this description are part of a very popular class or provide something that draws people in. Whether that be a lot of carry potential when mastered or a kit that allows them to make really cool outplays. Also, usually there are pro players or streamers that also help bring up the popularity of these characters as well. For Genji and Widowmaker, they're both part of the DPS role, the most popular role in the game because of its perceived ability to carry games. And for Aurelia and Zed, it's the fact that they're assassins, a very popular class of champions because of their fast pace and ability to one-shot other champions. Yoru fits this description where Viper and Skye don't because he's a duelist, which is the most popular role in the game. On top of that, he's also being played by a very popular YouTuber and streamer Red, who's showing off what kind of plays can be done when the agent is mastered. With all of this, you would think that more people would gravitate towards him and want to main him. But anyways, now that I'm done with Yoru's strengths, it's time to start talking about his weaknesses, and there are two main ones I'm going to cover. 1. Yoru requires more coordination than some other agents to be most effective. And 2. His skill floor is higher than most other agents in the game. For his first weakness, the biggest example of why coordination is necessary to make Yoru an effective pick is his ultimate. Again, since Phoenix is his biggest counterpart, I'm going to be using him for comparison. Let's take the example of where both agents are trying to execute onto a site using their ultimates. While Yoru is ulting, he can't shoot or use his flash, meaning that the primary value the ultimate provides is the information he provides his team. When he enters onto a site, he can use his ultimate to check corners and ping enemy locations for his team. This allows his team to easily flash corners and get free picks on enemies and pretty much take an entire site for basically free. The problem with this is that especially in lower elo games where the coordination is worse, your teammates don't always follow up on the information you give them. And even if you told them to follow your ult beforehand, that doesn't mean that they actually will, so a lot of the time the enemies can just follow your ult and then force you to teleport out before it ends, pretty much getting no value. And this was even worse before his latest buffs because he couldn't teleport while in his ultimate and would just die coming out of it a lot of the time. Compare that to Phoenix. When he ults, although not ideal, he can still flash for himself and potentially get a kill when he enters with his ult, allowing him to be much more self-sufficient. So when comparing these two ultimates, they both cost 6 ultimate points and are very similar, but one of them allows you to put the value in your own hands, while the other one requires some extra help from your teammates for follow-up. The second big weakness that Yoru has is his high skill floor. What I mean by a high skill floor is that the base value provided by a character when you've never played them before is relatively lower than other characters. Again, I want to compare Yoru to Phoenix. As an example, let's use Phoenix's Molly. His Molly can be used in many ways. Now obviously you can use his Molly to heal, but you can also use it to Molly off a choke point to slow down an enemy push or retake, and you can use it to clear corners that enemies might be hiding in. The thing with Phoenix though is that even a player that's in low elo that may not understand all the different uses of the Molly and know how to use it properly to get the most value out of it, any player picking up Phoenix for the first time still understands how to use it to heal off chip damage, at least getting some value. And this is the same with Phoenix's wall as well. Not many low elo players will use it to split a site when pushing or block off a sight line or use it to flash out of, but they can still get some value out of it through its healing. Compare that to Yoru. His teleport allows him to get out of sticky situations to get into unexpected locations and can be combined with his flash to make aggressive teleport plays for entering onto a site. His footsteps can be used to fake a site, to trigger util, or even just to mind game enemies. For example, let's say that you're attacking on bind and you know that the enemy Raze likes to boombot out of hookah to get early info. You can leave your footsteps on the ground and then activate them when you hear it to trick the Raze into thinking that there's an enemy there. This not only denies the enemy information, but also gives them false information, potentially delaying a rotation. The problem is that all of these options are only viable when the person using Yoru is more experienced and is better at split-second decision making and understands the game well enough to know what they should be doing in a given situation. A lot of times in low elo, Yoru players don't even use his util at all during a round. Or if they do, it's usually one flash, and sometimes they just throw their footsteps in front of them. But compared to Phoenix, the value he provides is just so much higher for most players. It's only once you get into higher elos where the players have the skill to be able to even use Yoru effectively enough to justify the pick. And for a lot of low elo players, they generally find his kit to be underwhelming when they first pick him up. And this isn't because his kit is weak, but because the baseline value you get from his kit is very low when you don't understand how to use it. Okay, so now that we've talked about his weaknesses, what can be done to help improve his pick rates? Well, honestly, I don't think there's a change Riot could make that could fix the main weaknesses I talked about without majorly changing the identity of the agent. They already fixed a lot of his issues with his last buffs and made him much more fluid, but I think the issue is that he's designed in a way that makes him very difficult to play. And I think that Yoru is going to stay a niche agent that's only picked by players in higher elos. There are a couple of quality of life changes they could make though to help improve him just a little bit. The first change is to increase the speed of his teleport. It's an ability that's supposed to be able to allow Yoru to get out of sticky situations, but in its current state, the animation of teleporting is so long that you can't really escape properly. A lot of the time, you die before the animation ends or take a lot of damage and only have 10 to 20 health left for the rest of the round. The second quality of life change would be to make his footsteps tall enough to match the height of an agent model. At first, this might sound kind of crazy, but the main point of the ability is to mimic an actual player. And this change wouldn't be as strong as you think because the only real ability affected by this change are Cypher's trips. In their current state, the footsteps only trigger Cypher trips if they're close enough to the ground, but I think they should be able to trigger up to the height of an actual agent to make them better at faking pushes. And I honestly think that this change to Yoru's footsteps would not really be a big deal, but also add just one more small plus to his kit that could help his pick rate. If you have any ideas about how Riot could change Yoru, please leave them in the comments. I really want to know what you guys can come up with. Also, if you agree or disagree with any of the points I made in this video, please let me know. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a like if you did and subscribe for more Valorant related content.